Kana Hobnappy relatives, Membiwa Tuhushko Pimiha. Welcome back to Iconic American Indian, the podcast. I'm your host, Opie Miha. I hope everyone is doing well on this beautiful Friday. Here in Ohio, we did get a pretty nice, decent snowfall. So hopefully everyone is being safe out there and things are well with everyone. So today I wanted to go over a new series that I'm going to start doing called the Saponi Diaspora. And my main focus with this is, I did mention a few live streams ago that I was going to start going over the tribe that I'm associated with, my ancestors, my genealogy, the people, family I connect to. So this is, again, it's just some more history over the Saponi. This information comes via Vance Hawkins. He's going to be covering some information done by Dr. Richard Allen Carlson. All right. So as you can see on the screen, we're going to go ahead and get started and read through this. Let me blow this up a little bit so you guys are able to see what I'm reading about. All right, so let's go ahead and get things started. So it says Carlson Part 1, Trouble with the Neighboring Tribes. All right, so this is excerpts from Who's Your People? It says Dr. Richard Allen Carlson wrote a PhD dissertation about his family. He, like me, and this is Vance Hawkins speaking, had Indian blood that he couldn't prove. So in a sense, he and I are on a similar quest. He speaks of his family's Gillian-Miller application, and I believe the Gillian-Miller roles do pertain to Cherokee families. If I am incorrect about that, someone please let me know in the comments. Okay, so he speaks of his family's Gillian-Miller application being rejected back in the beginning of the 20th century. I hope to quote bits and pieces of this work. Carlson ties the Melungeons to the Saponi Indians. He never mentions they were part Portuguese. All right, so let's move on. On page 6, Carlson says, today, the Sawyersville Indians persist a small but distinct population of people living around the old Michigan and Ohio muckfields and parts of Oklahoma and the Kentucky mountains. Their families came from Appalachia to the muck, a folk term referring to the vast peat bogs that once dotted the Midwest in the early to mid 1900s. Says in order to find seasonal work in the onion fields that thrived there. For nearly 2 centuries prior to that time, the people's ancestors had maintained their Indian identity while living in a distinct Indian community deep in the heart of Kentucky's Appalachia. During that time, a few expatriate Cherokee families attached themselves to the families of a band of Christiana Saponi. By the early 1800s, the citizen Indian families left their homes off the New River in the mountains of the Virginia-North Carolina border region and ultimately formed the Grassy Rock, Stone Mountain, and Sawyersville Indian communities. All right, let's continue. Carlson speaks of refugee Indian families. He speaks of 3 Indian populations, Grassy Rock, Stone Mountain, and Sawyersville. Then says, just prior to the period when the prominent anthropologists like James Mooney and Frank Speck were speculating on the identity and fate of Eastern Indian survivals, other outside observers were characterizing these 3 interrelated Indian populations as Melungeon. And this trend continues to this day. No confirmed etymology of this regionally specific label has been developed, but most contend the word stems from the French mélange, meaning mixed. All right. Primarily a result of a few particularly influential publications that emerged from 1889 to 1891. The imposed Melungeon label is used in attempts to explain Melungeon origins. These explanations are based on various conjectural histories supported by popular myths and legends regarding, in part, shipwrecked Phoenician sailors, the lost colony of Roanoke, Turkish mercenaries, the Welsh chief Modoc, Pardo's lost sailors, and or the lost tribes of Israel, all of whom are said to have took up with Indian women to contemporary Melungeon populations. These theories segregate Melungeon identity from Indian identity, and instead hold the Stone Mountain, Greasy Rock, and Sawyersville Indian population to be representative of many mislabeled marginal groups or racial isolates, racial survivor or racial enclaves, scattered throughout the American Southeast. Implicit in these labels are sociological assumptions regarding the culture of poverty and miscegenation. All right. From page 21 to 22. Most popular and professional writers still accept the premise generated in the 1800s that Melungeon history and heritage, biological and social, is forever lost to contemporary researchers. Such outsiders have thus downplayed the people's own assertion of being Indians in favor of emphasizing the possibility of white, black, Portuguese, Phoenician, Jewish, Moorish, Turkish, and the lost colony ancestry among them, even though all mention that these potential Old World ancestors must have taken up with the Indians to bring forth the present population. Says a poignant example is apparent in a 1947 Saturday Evening Post article focusing on the Greasy Rock population, showing a photo of Elder Asa Gibson. The author wrote, "Were his ancestors Welsh warriors, Phoenicians, or survivors of Roanoke? Asa says he's 75 years old and an Indian." All right, so from chapter 1, the Saponi and their relations, crisis to Christ, and back again. With consent of the ex-governor of Virginia, Alexander Spotswood, which I have mentioned in a lot of the Saponi history, a small band of Christiana Saponi Indians had been residing on Spotswood's private land holdings at Fox Neck on the Rapidan River. They had lived there on the western fringes of Old Virginia at least since 1738, but not long after Spotswood's death in the summer of 1740. This band of Christiana Indians had become having troubles with local settlers. In the spring of 1742, 26 of the Saponi men residing at Fox Neck Village were in court defending themselves from the vague accusation of doing mischief. Now, less than 1 year later, Saponi men again found themselves arrested and brought before the court of Orange County held near Somerville Ford for stealing hogs and burning the woods. Names are preserved in court records show Saponi men named John Collins, Alex McCarchan, John Bowling, Maniasa, Craft Tom, Blind Tom, Foolish Jack, Isaac, and Harry as among those arrested and brought in to face the charges. Having had their guns seized, the men were taken before the court for trial. By precept under the hands and seals of William Russell and Ed Spencer, gentlemen under the charges of not only stealing hogs and burning the woods, but also terrifying one Lawrence Struthers, who claimed he had been shot and chased by the Saponi. The Saponi men were ordered held until bonded, after which they were ordered to leave the county. All right. Following the identity of the Saponi from documents recorded before this 1743 incident, it becomes clear that this band had previously a part of the composite Indian community that, some 25 years earlier, had flourished at Fort Christana Reservation down on the Meherrin River. The Christana Band of the Saponi were also a living legacy of the Saponi signers of the infamous Treaty of Middle Plantation of 1677. Now, you guys can look up this Treaty of Middle Plantation, and it will show the names of the people who signed on this treaty. In 1732, William Byrd III recalled the configuration of these Siouan tribes consolidating at Fort Christana Reservation. He described how each of these were formerly a distinct nation, or rather several clans or cantons of the same nation, speaking the same language and using the same customs. All right, so that's in 1732. Starting page 59, Carlson says Governor Spotswood had long proposed to educate Indians in their own towns. The governor argued elsewhere that by educating the Indians in their own villages, Virginia could go far to banish savage customs in a generation or two among the tribes, where they could be made more useful as neighbors, as Spotswood perceived it. The colony's military and economic interests directly related to his long-standing conviction of wanting to Christianize and civilize the tributaries. The Indians living in the colony of Virginia were called, in those days, tributary Indians. All right, you guys can do the etymology on tributary. I think I went over that before. As Carlson mentions in 1716, a trip made to Fort Christana, a place where the Saponi were settled been by Spotswood. The governor visited the fort with a clergyman named Reverend John Fontaine. Fontaine mentioned the fort was located on the Meherrin River, and about 200 Saponi Indians resided near the fort. Fontaine says he was surprised that some of them could speak good English. Let's continue. Carlson then says, page 64, Fontaine spent a considerable amount of time conversing with the instructor of the Saponi Indian School, Reverend Charles Griffin. Frustrated at the repeated denials from the Virginia Council to fund a missionary school teacher for the Saponi, Spotswood still personally employed the English clergyman. Fontaine found Griffin enthusiastically carrying out his mission to teach the Indian children and bring them to Christianity. Besides running the fort's church, Reverend Griffin's work among the Saponi involved teaching the children to read the Bible and repeat common prayers. He was also teaching barter skills in speaking, reading, and writing English, and Fontaine noted he have had good success amongst them. One evening, Fontaine attended a common prayer reading and noted that the 8 Indian boys participating answered very well to their prayers and understood what is read. All right. In 1716, Spotswood was reporting to the Bishop of London on the continued success of the school and operation for the Saponi, but desperately requested more funding. And the governor frequently made trips to the Saponi Reservation, and the law officially directing the Indian Company to take over the fort later in December was passed. Now, Carlson speaks of several attacks from the Five Nation Indians and others upon the Saponi and mentions the killing of some Catawbas, whom it says are allies of the Saponi. He says despite the peace made in 1718, the Iroquois attacked again in 1722. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit here about Reverend John Fontaine. So Reverend John Fontaine wrote a memoir entitled Journey of John Fontaine, an Irish Huguenot, son in Spain and Virginia, 1710 to 1719. Then it says at this link here, there's a section on the Huguenots. Several paragraphs are dedicated to this Reverend John Fontaine, quoting from it, "We have," So I will drop this link in the description of the video for you guys to check out. It says John Fontaine's father and grandfather were Huguenots who suffered official persecution by the Catholics in France. In 1693, John was born in England, to which his father had fled as a refugee. His father then migrated to Ireland and succeeded in getting John a commission in an Irish regiment in 1710. John Fontaine served briefly in Spain, then investigated Virginia in 1715-19 before returning to England. All right, so I'll drop this this other link here about the Virginia Huguenots. And it says, learn more about Virginia Huguenots people in the link above. It says, so we have a Saponi Indian surnamed Griffin in 1743, living on Governor Spotswood's land, and a teacher at the Saponi school near Fort Christanna surnamed Griffin. We have a French Huguenot Reverend visiting the Saponi at Fort Christanna, and the word Melungeon comes from the French mélange, meaning to mix. There's also a Collins Saponi in 1743, and we know there were Collins Melungeons in the 1790s. It says we have evidence connecting the Melungeons to the Saponi. I'm looking forward to more evidence that will emerge in the next 500 plus pages. All right, page 79 to 95, page 70 to 95. Of Carlson's dissertation, discussed from about 1718 to 1728, the author talks about the Indians at Fort Christanna, saying that although they went under the name of Saponi, they were a Occaneechi, a Stuganox, Mepotskis, and Tutelo. The author includes the Adapanis as well. There's a story of an Indian named Sawney, who had recently returned to Virginia from Canada. He had been captured by the French Indians. Somehow he escaped about 1724 and returned to Virginia. Once in Virginia, he was arrested and was accused of threatening the inhabitants with incursions from his former allies, the French Indians from Canada. He denied bringing messages to the Saponis. I mention this because I know Dad had an uncle named Uncle Sawney or Swanee. So the story of this Sawney caught my attention. The similarities of these names is probably just a coincidence, though. All right, keep it moving. Well, the Northern Indians did continue their attacks in Virginia, Carlson says. More Virginia settlers were killed by Iroquois in the winter of 1725 to 1726. The sachems of the Five Nations replied it was some of their warriors operating without authority in conjunction with some French Indians and Tuscaroras who committed the killings. The sachems of the Iroquois defended their warriors, saying the killings of the Virginians was a mistake and that they were really after enemy Indians. It was recorded that about this time 7 Saponi were killed or captured by some Tuscarora warriors. So that's an interesting statement, that they got the Virginia settlers confused with the enemy Indians. So it says in 1727, the Saponi came to the Virginia Assembly in Williamsburg and asked for satisfaction. The Saponi said to the Virginians took no action on the Tuscarora. They would take the matter in their own hands. Well, Virginia did nothing, so the Saponi went to the Catawba, who did take action. It says there was an attack on the Meharin Indians, who complained to the same Virginia Assembly the Saponis had complained to the previous year. They blamed the Occaneechis and Saponis, and the Nottaways complained the Meharins had attacked them. The Saponis, with the Catawba, attacked the Tuscarora of King Blunt's town. North Carolina officials meanwhile blamed the Catawba and the primary instigator of these feuds, also holding Saponi and Occaneechi responsible. Governor Spotswood had retired and was replaced with Governor Gooch, and he was not as friendly toward his Saponi as his predecessor. The Virginians had done nothing to help the Saponi when they asked for help after 7 of their men were killed. while the Catawba did come to their aid. To add to this mistrust, 3 Saponi men were accused of killing 2 Nottaways. 3 Saponi chiefs were held in jail until the guilty of the killings were brought forward. The killing of the son of the Tutelo chief also added fuel to the fire. A report came in, page 76, that John Suwano and a fellow named Ben Harrison, apparently an Indian named after the white trader, went south to bring 100 Catawba warriors to protest the incarceration of the 3 Saponi men. The Saponi said that if Captain Tom was hung, they would take their wives and children over the Roanoke and then return to drive the whites and Negroes to the James River and go to war. The Tutelo king, grieving over the death of his son, threatened the life of the governor, saying that he'd go off to some foreign Indians. The old Tutelo king was ordered to be arrested, but Carlson says he found no evidence that this ever happened. This takes us to the end of 1728 and the end of Carlson's first chapter. From 1714 to 1728, the Saponis, Tutelos, and Occaneechees, and others came together. War with the Iroquois and pressure from the colonists forced this option upon them. However, pressures from the colonists to make them conform to colonial laws also alienated them. They did obtain satisfaction from the Catawba, their allies. According to Carlson, Byrd stated that the executions by the colonists of 3 Saponi causes Saponi to remove to the Catawbas. There are some interesting comments about the Indians' way of life. First is the mention of corn. Carlson is paraphrasing Byrd. When talking of the colonists, he calls borderers, meaning the people that lived on the Virginia-North Carolina border. Byrd also decrees the borderers' means of economy and substance, especially in North Carolina, where he contemptuously noted they raised Indian corn instead of tobacco, and fruit orchards, which he blamed on laziness. Indian corn, he noted, is of so great increase that a little pains will substitute a very large family with bread. Next, concerning sex between races, Carlson again turns to Byrd, saying Byrd and a few other ex-traders of the survey team would make a side trip into Virginia in hopes of finding some entertainment. In the Nottaway Indian town, the entertainment the surveyors sought out among the Nottaways turns out to have been sexual in nature. After mentioning two pretty English women, the narrative continues. We could find it in our heart to change these fair beauties for the copper-colored ones of Nottaway town. So they were trying to give the Nottaway Indians English women for their copper-colored women. So it's continuing to quote Byrd. Carlson writes of Byrd, he wrote in that evening journal entry that the Nottaway offered us no bedfellows, according to good Indian fashion, which we had reason to take unkindly. So they ended up not giving them any Nottaway women. Continuing on this theme, Carlson writes, page 85, still quoting Byrd, one way of convincing these poor infidels and reclaiming them from barbarity, and that is charitably intermarry with them according with the modern policy of most Christian king in Canada and Louisiana. He continues saying that had the English done as the French, the country would be swarming with more people than it has insects, and even their copper-colored complexions would admit of bleaching, if not in the first, at the farthest in the second generation. It is strange, therefore, that any good Christian should have refused a wholesome, straight bedfellow, when he might have so fair a portion with her as the merit of saving her soul. All right, so we're getting towards the end of this. It says, Bird had a Saponi guide, Ned Bearskin. It was said that this was his hunting name. Ned, it was said, was a great hunter and kept them fed. It was said that Ned spoke English very well. Mention was made of seeing the smoke of northern Indians, enemies of the eastern Sioux Indians, as they were firing the woods, as was the Indian custom. And this takes us to the next section, chapter 2, the Saponi Diaspora, 1728 to 1743. All right, relatives, so that is the first part of the Saponi Diaspora that I wanted to cover today. I hope everyone is doing well. Again, thank you to everyone who has stuck with me all these years, past couple years, that have, checked out the videos, all the people that, write to me, how I've helped them. It means the world to me, and everyone who's donated and who has visited the website and made purchases, and just everything that everyone has done. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I will see everyone next time, and we will continue the Saponi Diaspora. Take care. Peace. Kana hop nappy relatives and biwa pahushka hobi miha Sobi miha.
This is a dangerous groups that we're dealing with now.
That's the hijack again. Kinda hop nappy relatives. They had no idea their ancestors had been free.
I'll beat me half. 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 I'll beat me half.
They had no idea their ancestors had been free.
I'll beat me half. I'll beat me half. I'll beat me half. I'll beat me half.
That's the hijack again.